What is a blind? In this brief video, I'm going to be explaining what a blind is and why we have them in poker. So, what is a blind? Simply put, a blind is a mandatory bet made before you have a chance to review your cards, meant to stimulate action. Let's look at the blind in action. Here is an 8-handed, no-limit hold'em game. The dealer button is in the 8th seat. The action proceeds clockwise around the table. Before the cards are dealt, the player to the immediate left of the dealer in the 1 seat must place in a preliminary bet called a small blind, and the player to his immediate left in the 2 seat must place in a larger bet called the big blind. Thereafter, the betting proceeds as it would in any poker game, with players having to either call the preceding bet, raise it, or fold. The blind bet, in this example, $2, serves 2 purposes. First, it builds a pot, something that is worth fighting over, and it forces the action of subsequent players as they do not have the option of checking, something they have in future betting rounds. To appreciate the usefulness to the game of the blind bet, imagine a poker game with no required bet before the cards are dealt. In that game, with nothing at stake initially, players could just sit around forever waiting for the very best starting cards. Good, careful players would just wait for aces or kings before they risked anything. The game would become awful, with nobody willing to risk any money at all on anything but the very strongest starting cards. Who'd want to play in a game like that? A related betting action called an ante was introduced a long time ago to also create a pot. But even then, with an ante, since players could begin by checking, games often devolved into what I call snooze fests, with everyone checking and the pot staying very small, with just the antes in it. And then someone might bet when they hit a big hand, but they'd find that everyone else would fold. The idea behind the blind is that it both builds the pot and it forces players to act, either calling the blind, raising it, or folding. The person making the big blind retains the right to raise, even if the blind itself has not been raised. Let's look at a sample hand to see exactly how this might play out in a real game. Here's an 8-handed, $1, $2, no-limit game. The $1, $2 refers to the size of the blinds. In this case, $1 for the small blind and $2 for the big blind. The player in the 3 seat must either call the $2 big blind, raise it by at least $2, or fold. In this example, they elect to fold. This option proceeds clockwise around the table until and unless someone elects to raise. In this example, the 5 seat decides to raise to $10. Thereafter, in this initial betting round, players must call the $10 or raise by at least the size of that player's raise. In this case, $8. They raise the big blind $8 to $10. That's an $8 raise. In this example, the 6 seat himself wishes to raise. Now think for a second. What's the minimum amount he can make the bet? If you thought $18, you would be correct. He must make no less than an $8 raise. In this instance, he raised to $25. Everyone folded around to the initial raiser who called that raise to $25. Here's another example. But in this instance, a loose passive game, the 3 seat, 5 seat, and small blind all called the $2 big blind, and no one raised. The big blind has the option of raising himself. It's the only time in a poker game when a player may do this, when no one has raised the big blind. The big blind, having had 3 callers, elects to raise to $15. The 3-seat calls and the other 2 players fold. Just a few other notes about blinds before we end this video. Nearly all Hold'em games are played with a small and a big blind, but there are a few exceptions. In a few poker rooms around the world that I've played in, they still only play with 1 blind. That's how they used to play this game before they added the second blind. If that's the case, the player in the 2-seat has the option of folding, calling the small blind, or raising. In a few other rooms, especially in bigger games, there are 3 blinds, with the 3-seat having a mandatory third blind. Imagine $5, $10, $25. In a game like that, the 4-seat is the first player who acts voluntarily after he looks at his hand and decides whether to fold or call or raise that third blind. That concludes this simple explanation of blinds. I want you to know that I've produced another video on the related topic of straddles, which are voluntary blinds. To view that, please visit the website that is displayed on the screen now.